we do have a lot of sets on our film, but mostly I think it was probably 80%, 70%, 80% shot on location. Um, and I was a big proponent at first of like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we shooting on location? It's going to be really, really difficult. We could do this on a stage, but Ishana was very important for her to get the realism of being on location with the difficulties. And I kind of vibed with her. It also creates limitations to a certain extent that you have to work with.
If you were working on The Watchers, from a purely from a cinematography standpoint, it definitely has a very specific tone and feel to it. And I'll just sort of dive right into it. How did you come on board The Watchers?
I was hit up by Ishana while I was in the middle of another production that was shooting. I live in Iceland, so I was in Iceland on a project, and I can't remember exactly how it was initiated, but I had this one meeting with Ishana, and it felt really good. Like it was a really nice meeting. She seemed super lovely, and we just kind of spoke as friends really in our first
Hmm.
meeting. It just felt like it could be a really nice collaboration.
Right.
And we took it from there, and I read the script, and I thought the script was really interesting and had a lot of potential. Uh, and then, and then I joined her. I had a quick meeting with her father, like a week or so after that, and then, yeah, and then I came on board, and it was a pretty quick turnaround because I think I finished that production that I was on while being interviewed for the Watchers, and then I think I had about 2 weeks off before coming straight to Ireland to meet them in person and start scouting all the locations there.
Lovely. So you being from Ireland, the film sets in Ireland. I'm assuming based on what you just said, it's shot in
Yeah,
Ireland.
I'm from Iceland, not from Ireland.
Iceland.
Yeah,
Sorry, I misheard you. I
no
apologize.
worries.
Iceland.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No worries.
But the fact that the film was shot in Ireland and set in Ireland, what was your location scouting like? Because I know finding locations, the right location is a challenging part, and forest itself looks pretty much more or less the same, but this particular film had a certain feel and elements to it, may it be real or may it be some of it on soundstage. Just kind of run through that process for me.
Well, the first thing that I happened before I even came to Ireland is I had a call with the executive producer, Joe Homewood,
Okay.
who's fantastic. She was the producer on Banshees of Inisherin, and she's a really lovely lady. And she was like our kind of Irish producer, so she knew all the ins and outs. So the first phone call with her was very funny because she was like, that Ireland doesn't really have that many forests. And I was like, oh,
Hmm.
really? She's like, yeah, we have a few patches here and there, but we're really gonna have to tie in these multiple spots and make it feel bigger than it is. So I was like, oh, cool. So when we went there, Ishana had already got some photos from a location scout that was there. So we dived right in and we went, I think the first place that we went to see was the main woods that you see in most of the film, which are these really tall, dead-looking, dense trees.
Right.
Um, but we were a little bit worried that it would be a little bit monotonous to be constantly in there in those woods. So we tried to find some other areas that looked different, but still had this kind of magical quality to them. So, for
Mm.
instance, these kind of mossy woods that sometimes appear in the scenes with Kira, where her burrow is, which are more green, but it feels almost like weeping willows. The moss is just like hanging off the branches. That was found by Ashana actually just on the side of the road. She was talking to our
Oh,
driver.
really?
Oh, can you stop here for a second? There's something I think interesting over there. We just stopped off and we just went up this ditch and there was this magical little thing right there off the side of the road. It was very, very small. And you could maybe have one spot that you stand in the middle that you could look around yourself and be like, okay, this looks kind of endless, but it was very everything was cheated quite a bit. The woods were all quite small, but
Yeah.
none of them were very accessible. They were all pretty tricky to gain access to for all the, trucks and equipment and all these kind of things. And a big chunk of the location scouting was also spent on the house at the end of the film. Uh,
Mm.
we probably scouted about 20 homes to find the right one, and it changed versions, and it was, you know, from kind of pretty rundown little houses to these more grandiose things, and there was kind of an I don't know, we were really playing with that idea of how this would look, and I'm kind of happy that it ended up with something super modernist and clean and shiny because it's just totally different, So it's like either it could be good or it could be bad, but it's definitely making a statement by going so
Yeah.
sleek and modern all of a sudden and not like something wooden and shabby and kind of natural looking. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, without talking about the film or the ending or anything like that, um, the house that you're talking about, I actually felt that when that scene came up, that how like I felt it was its own character,
Yeah.
right? Like you could definitely feel that. Um, in terms of the tone of the film, the lighting of the film, I asked this from Yob as well, from an editing standpoint. The film, when you see the trailer and from the marketing standpoint, you see from producer M. Night Shyamalan and director Ishana Shyamalan, the first thing that comes to your mind, okay, this is going to be like the same kind of a feel as your M. Night Shyamalan films are over the last 20, 24 years. But I said this to Yob as well, even though there was that slight element there, I saw and I noticed a lot of Ishana's own voice in the film and her style and her approach. Um, what kind of communication she had with you, if at all, aside from like what her trans putting her vision out to you and translating it into screen, like was there any conversation like let's not do this, or let's try to avoid that, not to make sure that it doesn't look like XYZ from her dad's film or anything like that, or was there completely different conversation?
Yeah, we never really talked about her dad's work. I mean,
Good.
hardly at all. Her dad mentioned her, like, Knight mentioned his work a couple of times,
Right.
especially in regards to, I remember one conversation in regards to shooting on location, which because we do have a lot of sets on our film, but mostly I think it was probably 80%, 70%, 80% shot on location. Um, and I was a big proponent at first of like, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we shooting on location? It's going to be really, really difficult. We could do this on a stage, but Ashana was very important for her to get the realism of being on location with the difficulties. And I kind of vibe with her. It also creates limitations to a certain extent that you have to work with. Um, so that was like a thing that she tried to, I think, steer the ship into that kind of realm, um, which was good. Uh, I know that originally they wanted to build the whole coop, that whole structure in
Yep.
the Paris, which they did. But I was a big proponent of like, I'm just, I'm down, but I don't see why all these interior things have to be done in the middle of the woods. It's gonna rain on us. It's gonna, there's gonna be problems. It'll be really limiting in terms of how I could light it. And also that conversation kind of rather than me coming in and being like, oh, I don't want to do this, I want to do that, I just kind of came up with references of like, oh, this is something that I'm thinking of how it looks inside the coop. What do you think? And then if it's a yes, then I need this, and that, to do it. So we ended up doing a lot of scenes that were like split between stage and location work, and they were like kind of comped together. So obviously all the interiors of the coop, the structure in the woods were
Right,
shot
right,
on
right.
stage, and the exteriors it was like comped in, and so were a lot of the burrows. You see it in the trailer where she's going down the hole and you look up, it was shot in sections. We would shoot the upper part in the real woods, and then the shaft, we would call it, was one set built on a certain stage, and then the bottom kind of crevice was in another stage. But sometimes there's shots that see all three, where the camera goes from the top and goes through and passes through multiple sets. So that was all like a kind of jigsaw puzzle that we had to put together.
Right.
But she was very, very well prepared when I joined the project in terms of how she wanted to shoot it in terms of shot list. She had this very, very precise vision, which was really nice for me to come in because I could just tell exactly what it is that she wants and what her jive is, and we adapted it from there. But she definitely had a really clear visual vision. I think she really enjoys shot listing. She really enjoys storyboarding. So I just came in as like a sort of a partner in crime and a guide, and you know, we could talk about it, and she had someone to bounce ideas off of other than just herself and her storyboard artist, that we could really kind of try to figure out why it is that we're doing what we're doing rather than just you know, because it's, you know, cool, like it looks nice or something like that. We could, like, you know, why is it that it's working? Like, let's translate the feeling that you get into words. So it was, we had a lot of sessions talking about the shots and stuff. So it was fun. She's a really visual person. I haven't worked with her father, so I don't know if he's the same or not, but she was very, very in tune with like very high visual vocabulary. It was nice.
Nice. A comment before a question. You talked about Ishana's vision of shooting as much as possible in real location, and I'm so glad that she was advocating that because the feel that you get in the opening of the film right off the bat, right, the opening scene, like you wouldn't get that if it was like a small set or if it was visual effects, screens or whatnot, LED screens. But it was just so authentic and so real in from a standpoint of location. And obviously the production designing itself, like that comes in later in the film, was really, really well done. Going back to what you said about M. Night Shyamalan referencing his films, if you can talk a bit about that, like what was that context about? Like, was he giving
Uh,
examples to you
he didn't
or?
talk, like, all I remember is literally all I'm saying. There was one conversation and it stuck with me, and I thought it was kind of interesting.
Mm.
And that was like the end of it for me in terms of that topic, because it started with looking for, not for woods or anything like that, with this home, and we discussed whether we should build it or not. There was some conversation happening with the producers of like the costs, comparing the cost of shooting on location, having a family move out for X amount of weeks so the art department can dress it, like the cost of that and the rental versus just building it. You know what I mean? And Ishana was like, I don't want to build it. I worked on, maybe it's because I worked on Servant, and it's like I'm kind of tired of working on location. And then her father said something that stuck with me. He said it to Ishana, but it stuck with me. He was like, "Do you remember in The Sixth Sense? Can you guess like which of those houses were sets and which were shot on location? Because it's kind of like a 50-50. So can you tell by watching Sixth Sense what it is?" And then I suddenly thought about it that, you know, I'm of the age that I remember watching Sixth Sense as a kid and having a huge impact on me, and I never for once doubted the fact that this was shot on a stage. That's kind of like the thing that I know of now as like, growing up and working as a cinematographer. So then I was like, oh yeah, I second, what Knight is saying. It's like, it's really just how you light it. You know what I mean? You could make it look real if it's lit to look real. So that was kind of interesting. But push come to shove, we ended up shooting on location. So, and it worked out. So it was great.
That's an interesting point by Shyamalan, M. Night Shyamalan about Sixth Sense because not, you until now you just mentioned it. Sometimes you think about how much of a film was shot on a set versus real location. Like some films just do that. With
Yeah.
that film, I've never ever thought about where it was shot or all I know it was like in Philadelphia where he grew up. Like that's all I know.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. The
Yeah.
fact that he said that. Um, from a standpoint of the actual visual feel of the film, the texture, the tone. Was there any references, nothing to do with her dad's film? We're not gonna talk about that. Just in general, that she kind of came up to you and said, "This is the kind of feel that I want." Just as an examples, or maybe you had some suggestions. What was that collaborative effort like, just to get the feel and the tone right visually?
We had a whole slew of references that were taken from uh, all sorts of sources, from highbrow art, lowbrow art, films, anime, comics, all sorts of things that we would sort of, I would print everything out and put it up in a big office, and I would just, once everything is done, we would just stand in front of it and we would make a sort of mishmash blend of everything. But we knew that we wanted it to have a stylized feel to it. It wasn't like pure realism and had this fantasy element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but by analyzing many, many photographs and stuff like that, we were able to like break it apart and reverse engineer how to achieve that sort of look. Um,
Mm.
so there isn't one example in particular that I can remember right now. I remember all sorts of references. I remember that none of the references of woods, movies that were shot in the woods, were stuck with us. Let's put it that way. It was always other things. It was always like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this would look really cool. Now put that image into the woods. How do we achieve that? And, that led us to decide to shoot almost everything day for night in the woods, where we did a lot of tests on and a lot of manipulations of the color and the look and stuff to get it to where we wanted it. But this idea of having a constant shroud of mist everywhere, and that the night scenes you just see infinitely, it never kind of fades to black, it just keeps going and going and going. Those were all derived from looking just at images and saying, how do we achieve that? And then we went to the woods with a camera and we shot it at night and during the day and with smoke and without smoke, and we would go and we'd look at it. And everybody in the team was very positive about that kind of testing process to find the look that we wanted. And the same thing happened with the interior of the coupe, which is like the polar opposite of that kind of smoky bluish kind of hue of the woods, was the that kind of yellow kind of honey tone sort of fill of light in the coupe, because in the script and in the novel it's described as spotlights, that they,
Mm.
they walk into this shed and then there's suddenly these spotlights turn on. And I was like, okay, I get it, but personally, I'm just saying spotlights, I don't think look very nice. Not that I think that it has to be like a beauty light or anything like that, but spotlights are quite harsh and they create quite harsh shadows, especially if they're coming from above. And isn't the whole idea of, well, I won't spoil the film, but once you kind of this idea of being watched, I was like, this should look like a like a vanity, like a storefront shop, like what's it called, the windows in a storefront where they have everybody kind of on display, and the lighting is very perfect and it fills in all the wrinkles and all the cracks, and so everything is visible, so you can look at the details and the fiber of the clothes and all these kind of things. So I was like, why don't we take a different approach than the spotlights? And one reference that stood out was I think it was it was it Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner? There's some
Yeah.
scenes in this, what was it, Jared Leto? I can't remember. There was some kind of underground sort of pyramid layer or something that had this honey-toned soft like source
Right,
that
right,
came
right.
from nowhere. You have no idea where it came from. It came from where the music came from. And that was like, and I remember there was like this image with a naked body standing in there, and it felt very kind of on display. And that was like this sort of go ahead to let's try this. And that led to a whole other series of tests that we had, instead of in the woods, we had in the studio, of what this structure would look like. And at the end of the day, the light that is emanating in the coop isn't what is physically there. It's this source. The whole ceiling is, it was built by the production designer out of concrete and this really heavy, huge thing. But at the end of the day, we never even used it. We just took the ceiling out and there was this huge, huge light source that would just fill everything in. So it would come in under your eyes and wrap in, and it would bounce from the mirror, and it just filled everything with this polar opposite hue of what the woods were, to create that contrast between that kind of fantasy blue look outside and this kind of honey-toned color inside. So it was like a fun process of discovery. We didn't have this at the first meeting, Ishana and I. It was like a slow kind of testing, and looking at images, and our designer would Photoshop images together, and we would get kind of a sense, and we're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let's go for that.
That's pretty awesome, man. Working with Ishana, she's still young. Like I think I was talking to Yob, and I mean she looked young to me, but he told me that she was 24 when the film uh just came out, or 25, give or take.
Hmm.
And to have leadership skills and to run a film set, just because of my own experience in directing films, is not an easy task when you are even in your 40s or 30s or 50s. It's a big production, right? Like you just have to make sure everything, you have to steer the ship. You're the captain of the ship. And there's a lot of pressures. There's a lot of pressures, and you have to deal with it every day, every minute, every hour. Doing that at the age of 25. Yes, her dad is a producer. Yes, her dad is an established filmmaker, but having more so that pressure of her dad being a producer and making sure that you don't screw this up, not for any other reason, but for your own debut film. What was she like on the set in terms of her confidence level and her in terms of captaining the ship that you guys were all part of?
She was fantastic, and I couldn't think for a moment that she was the age that she actually was. It was the same comment that I had when I first heard about the project and heard that I was having a meeting with her. I was like, wait a minute, who is this? And I was like, whoa, I think she was 23 or something at the time. I was like,
Yeah.
that I remember myself at 23. I
Yeah.
remember the films that I met at that time and the mistakes that I made at that time. Do you know what I mean? That I grew from.
Yeah, 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 of
Also,
course.
you come with that to the table, but the minute you start talking to her, the amount of preparation and work and how ready she is, I haven't seen it from directors that are in their 60s. Do you know what I mean? She comes with so much like professional attitude to it, and in such a positive way that as a leader, which she definitely was the leader, she wasn't, sort of mm, kind of like force that was like nobody could step on my toes, something like that. She would listen, but she also wasn't wishy-washy. Like she knew what she wanted to do. She would listen to other people's opinions, take them, not take them, and she made the film that she wanted to make, and she surrounded herself by a team of people that were lifting her vision up further. So she was awesome as the captain of the ship. Like I just hope that it doesn't go away with her, as she makes more films and stuff, but it was absolutely wonderful, wonderful collaboration with her.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So, we all have our views about films. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I mean, from a standpoint of few things, which I'm not gonna talk about because that's not the purpose of this conversation. I felt that the film was missing few things, but that being said, I genuinely feel the way, I mean, even without hearing from you or even without before talking to Yob, you could tell that as a storyteller you could tell that how much confidence she has because it translates into the visual, it translates into the story. Yes, there's always issues with stories and thing, but I feel, regardless, even if she makes the next film and it tanks and it does terrible, I seriously feel that she has the ability of telling amazing stories, not because her dad is there, just because I think it comes natural to her. And that's
Hmm.
just based on what I saw. So, it's not easy to captain the ship at the age of 24. It's not
No.
easy. I mean, I remember, like you said, I remember my time. I was not like that at that age. So it's amazing that she is.
Yeah. And it's not easy to stick to your guns. Do you know what I mean? It's like I
Yeah.
I I came in with my ideas regarding, stuff, in the shot list. And, I had a moment where I spoke to her, which I love. This is part of how open she is, you know what I mean? And what a great kind of leader she is in terms of kind of just being honest and just being real, and you following her at the end, not because you're afraid, because you want to just do it. Do you know what I mean? You want to support that vision. Because I remember I came in and I was like, wow, this is a lot, in this movie, visually speaking, like there's a lot of crane shots and a lot of circular dollies and a lot of movement and a lot of stuff. And my project prior to this that was released was this film called Lamb, which was very, very minimal, where the camera, I think, was just on a tripod with no panning or tilting for the first like 40 minutes or something, very, very stationary and static. I was like, why on earth did you call me for a project that's so grandiose with so much stuff going on? And she was like, exactly. She said exactly because I needed, yin to my yang, I needed someone to come in and be the opposite force. So do you know what I mean? Did that mean that I came in and changed everything that she wanted to do? No, we did pretty much like what her vision was. But, she had this partner that she could listen to that would, voice to her, hey, what if we, you know, try it from this other angle and stuff like that. And she did that, with myself, and she did that, I'm sure, with Yob, and she did that with a lot of people. She would really engage with people that she felt were outside of her sphere. She didn't, let's say, hire down, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? She took people with different degrees of kind of sensibilities, I think, than she had in order to grow. Do you know what I mean? And she never let us like shift the tone of what she wanted to make or the story that she wanted to make. But that's kind of the thing. She was very, very good at navigating a film period, and also a film of this scale with this such complexity and stuff, because it was a very complicated film to achieve also.
Right. Um, in terms of lens selection, right? Every director has a different approach, and um, what were the conversations about going with? I mean, I could take a guess what lens you guys used or what kind of like focal length you guys were on. Um, but you tell me, like, what were the conversations before production, like how we're gonna
What's
achieve
what's your
this?
guess? I'm just curious before I tell you.
I would like to guess that mostly you guys shot between 28 and 50.
Interesting. I don't think we
I
ever shot wider than 50.
really
Yeah. But we did use the Alexa 65, so it's a
the
little
frame, the
bit,
cropping factor.
yeah, it's like everything is wider, right? A 50 on the 65 is maybe like a 35 or something on a,
Because with 50 you get a depth of field, right? Like
yeah,
very strong depth of, but
yeah,
I didn't feel that much as far as my memory can
yeah.
remember. Like
I think our
interesting.
favorite lens was the 85 for almost everything.
I'm just
Um,
trying.
for most
What
everything.
go
A
on, sorry.
lot of the woods, so her father shot second unit.
Oh, he
And
did.
he did. And by second unit, it's kind of it's not all the shots that you'd expect second unit to do, but it's often characters running from the back, or like feet in the mud, or like kind of things like this. Anything that didn't really involve an actor. Not all of it, but some of those.
Right.
And it was funny because we would the Shyamalans have this tradition that they watch dailies at the end of the day, like old school, where you gather in a room, all the heads of department, and you watch like yesterday's work, and have sushi or whatever, and talk about, oh, this is good, this is not good, which is a really cool process. And we'd watch footage from the second unit, and I was like, wow, it's so wide, the lenses they're using. I was the same as you. It's like all 28 to 35 and stuff, and we've never gone wider than a 50. It looks so different. But I kind of like the combo of the two. So again, you asked what the difference is in their visual aesthetic. Like that's, I think, definitely a thing. Ishana and I had this tendency of this more voyeur, longer lens, where the camera was further away, whereas I
Yeah.
think it was more kind of up and close in these kind of wide vignettes. So it was kind of fun. But we shot with the Alexa 65. The first conversation that I had with Ishana, we were both in agreement. I read the script and I was like, this is a 69 movie, or like a 185 film. Like this isn't,
Right.
even though this is a film for cinema, and I love, scope, and I mostly use anamorphic lenses for the projects that I do. And as much as it breaks my heart to say it, like this is a movie for height. Do you know what I mean? It's all the
Yeah.
trees and them
Yeah.
going down into the holes, and the structure, and we designed the window of the structure to be the same aspect ratio as the film, and like all these things. We're like, it has to be 185. So from there, we took the conversation. I was like, okay, let's look at the Alexa 65, and we looked also at some other stuff, and we even dangled the idea of shooting on film, which is something that her father and her are used to. Uh, Unfortunately, film, I kind of put my foot down and said like I can't do film not on real locations in the woods like this. Like it was so dark in those woods. We'd need
Yeah.
like it would be just absolutely be a logistical nightmare, and it'll slow us down. I was just like, forget about it. And then we tested a whole bunch of stuff, and I ended up going to London to Ari, and I think we tested every lens that they had. And we ended up with this set of lenses that I've never heard of called the Vegas, TLS Vegas.
I haven't
Uh,
heard of them either.
they're pretty new, and I tried to find information on them, and there isn't much. They're not horribly expensive lenses. I think what they are from, I really dug into research. The only thing I could find out about them, and that the guys at ARRI could tell me, was that they're medium format Nikon lenses from the 80s or something like that. And they were rehoused into these full frame lenses that don't fully cover the 65, but they cover the enough. You could crop, like I think we cropped in like 5% or something. We took like a tiny, tiny little bit just so there isn't too much black vignette in. Um, and they're very fast and they're very small, and they were just used on the Bong Joon-ho film on Mickey 17. They just came back from that, the Darius Kanji shot. And the guys at Ari was like, you should try these out. So those were not the lenses that I thought we were going to get. I had an idea in mind with this lens test. I was just kind of painting by numbers, and I was like, I'm gonna do the homework, shoot it, showcase it to Ishana, screen it, and then we'll decide together, right? And then I went through the things, and these are like the DNA lenses that are very famous, and these are the Leica lenses that are really famous. And oh, by the way, there was these crazy lenses. I don't think you're gonna like these. Do you know what I mean? Because they are a little funky. And then she was like, "Oh, I love those the weird like lenses because they have this. If you don't see it back to back, it's hard to describe, but they have this super high contrast, really, really shallow depth of field, and kind of not they're really high contrast, but they're not very sharp. They have this really kind of weird thing going on with them. And they do vignette quite a bit. And they
I was
have
yeah.
artifacts that are kind of not good. Do you know what I mean? But they're cool. And she was like, I love those lenses. And I was like, you know what? I kind of love them, but I'm also kind of a little bit scared of them because no one's really used them before. And, but we just kind of did another test with them, and then we're like, decided these are the ones. And that's what we used. On our A camera was the Alexa 65, which was great. So, like I said, like an 85 millimeter would look more like a 50 in terms of what
Mm.
it's. And then we had another mini for like whatever other things that we needed to do if we had to fit into a hole in the ground, or I don't know if it was on a wire or all sorts of like things like that. Uh, yeah, and that's what we used.
That's
So
so cool. I was just looking at the lenses on truelens.co.uk, and they just have that vintage feel. Like I could just look at them and I could feel that these are not like, something that was just designed yesterday and with new elements and new thing. You could feel that these have that look. And one of the things I did feel, guess before you even said it was vignette, that they're probably able to shoot really good vignette stuff. So awesome. That's really cool to know. I'm actually gonna forward this off to my DP as well, just to see if we
yeah,
can try
they're
it down
cool,
the
and
road.
they're not horribly expensive either. I think they're just not really known yet. So people are like, what?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
no
let's
one's
see.
heard of them. But I think, after this film now, and when Mickey 17 comes out, it also shot half of their film on it. I think they'll probably become more popular and more pricey.
Yeah, it takes a couple of films for like major films for people to catch on, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And be like, I want this, like now everybody wants the Dune lens or whatever, which is this super, super cheap lens from like a while ago.
yeah,
Really pricey now. So, it's all fashion.
awesome. What's next for you, man?
Well, I just finished Saturday. That's why we had to postpone to this week our discussion. I just finished on Saturday a 60-day shoot for a smaller kind of indie production here in Europe about the first female president in the history of the world, who happened to be Icelandic. Her name's Vigdis Finnbogadóttir. So it's like a kind of the Crown style costume drama in the 50s and 60s of Iceland and Stockholm and Sweden and Copenhagen and whatever. And it's the journey of this woman. So it's a really like polar opposite from The Watchers. It's just like a drama with a capital D, with, you know, no monsters and no VFX and no nothing, you know what I mean? It's just characters talking. So that was really fun. So that was going basically since we wrapped The Watchers until this last Saturday. So now I'm gonna take a break for a while and see what happens next. But the next film that I actually shot previous to The Watchers, but is coming out soon, is a film on Netflix called The Deliverance from Lee Daniels that I'm really excited about. It's going to be
Okay.
coming in September. So I shot that
Deliverance.
before The Watchers, but it went through a long process in post. So that's coming out soon. So I'm really excited for you and everybody to see that film.
That's awesome. Let me see. I'm just going on IMDb to look at it.
I think Netflix just announced it like a couple days ago, their first kind of kickoff for
It,
it.
I like the premise. I like
It's a
the premise.
really cool film. I'm really, really excited for people to see it. It's like a horror film also, but you know, like a lot of the horror films that I do, like Lamb and like The Watchers, and you know, they're not 100% horror. They're always like a little genre bending. So if The Watchers was like fantasy horror, this is like social horror, The Deliverance. It's like a lot about social issues, and it's a really, really cool, really, really cool film. So we'll see.
That's awesome, man. Let's chat about that closer to the release date,
For sure.
and would love to have you on again. This was really cool. Thank you so much, man, for all the detailed. I mean, we can probably talk for another couple of hours about this, but it maybe we'll save it for next time. But great
Oh,
work.
thank you.
Really like your energy, just talking and just being authentic, and it's really really cool. So thank you so much for your work.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. All right.
All right,
See
buddy.
you soon.
Bye
Bye.
bye.